On my 75th birthday, I thought my son was throwing me a surprise party. Instead, he showed up with a lawyer and eviction papers. He looked me in the eyes and said, "You've had your time, old man. Now it's my turn." But what he didn't know was that I had already changed everything, and the grandson he despised was about to inherit it all. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments, what would you do if your own child tried to erase you from your home? My name is George and I turned 75 this year. I never thought I'd spend my birthday questioning everything I ever sacrificed for my family. My wife passed away 8 years ago, and since then it's just been me in this old house. The one I built with my hands, the one where my son Michael took his first steps, learned to ride a bike, and later left from with nothing more than a shrug and a suitcase. I never asked for much, just a roof over my head and a bit of peace in the home I'd built. Michael had moved back a year ago, supposedly to help me in my old age, but over time it became clear that he wasn't here to care for me. He was here to take what he thought was already his. The tension started small. Michael began bringing up topics like property value, retirement communities, and even downsizing. He'd say things like, "Dad, don't you think this house is a bit much for someone your age?" Or, "You'd be so much better off somewhere with nurses." I laughed it off at first, thinking he was just worried about me, but the tone of his voice, the coldness behind his words, it felt like something else. He stopped calling me Dad, he started calling me George. That shift hit me harder than I expected. Still, I held on to hope. Maybe he was stressed. Maybe he was just looking out for me in his own messed up way. I even tried to bond with him again. I offered to teach him how to fix the broken fence in the backyard like old times. He declined, said he had a business meeting. That meeting turned out to be with the real estate agent. I didn't know that yet, but I would soon. And then my birthday came. I woke up to silence. No happy birthday, no breakfast, not even a card. But around noon, I heard the front door open. I was excited. Maybe he was planning a surprise. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe my son still had love in his heart. But when I walked into the living room, I saw Michael in a suit standing beside a man I'd never seen before, holding a briefcase. The look in my son's eyes wasn't warmth, it was business, cold, calculated, and I instantly knew this wasn't a celebration, it was an ambush. The man beside Michael introduced himself as an attorney, Michael's attorney. He pulled out a stack of papers and calmly began explaining that Michael had full authority to act on my behalf for all matters related to the house. Power of attorney, he said. I stared at him, then at my son, confused and stunned. Michael didn't even flinch. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're getting old, George. It's time to stop playing king of this broken castle." My hands started to tremble, not from fear, but from betrayal. He wasn't just trying to push me into assisted living. He was trying to erase me, to take everything my wife and I built and turn it into a dollar sign. I interrupted the lawyer, demanding to see proof. Michael sighed like I was being difficult and pulled out a document I'd apparently signed months ago, back when I'd been recovering from a fall and heavily medicated. That's when it hit me. He'd planned this. He'd waited until I was weak, vulnerable, trusting, and slipped those papers in among the hospital bills and insurance forms. I had trusted him, my son, to help me, and instead he'd taken advantage of me when I couldn't even walk without a cane. "I'm moving in full-time," Michael said coldly. "You'll be taken care of, don't worry. But this house, it's mine now. I have plans." That's when I saw it. The smugness in his smile. The same one he had when he used to lie to his teachers in high school. Except now, he wasn't skipping class. He was kicking out his own father. The lawyer handed me a packet, said I had 2 weeks to transition out before contractors began renovations. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even argue. Because what Michael didn't know, what he never bothered to ask, was that 2 months ago, I had rewritten my will, and everything, the house, the land, the investments, Even the antique car in the garage now belonged to my grandson, Ethan, the very boy Michael had cut out of his life over a petty argument 3 years ago. He hated Ethan, thought he was weak, soft, a disappointment. But Ethan was the only one who came to visit me, the only one who brought me groceries, the only one who called just to check in, not to scheme. So I let Michael talk. I let him believe he had won. But in my mind, I was already planning the moment that would change everything. For the next few days, I played the part. I shuffled around the house quietly, packed up old books, and pretended to look into retirement homes. Michael strutted through my home like he'd already claimed it, bringing in designers and appraisers, measuring the walls, even eyeing the antique grandfather clock my wife had adored. Every time he passed me, he offered this fake, patronizing smile, like I should be grateful he was handling things. I said nothing, but at night, I would sit in my study with the door closed, quietly reviewing the papers my own attorney had drawn up. The revised will, the asset transfer documents, everything was airtight. Michael thought he had outsmarted me with a dirty trick, but he had underestimated one thing. I may be old, but I'm not stupid, and I never, ever forget betrayal. I called Ethan that Sunday. He picked up after one ring. His voice cracked when he heard mine. He thought I was calling to say goodbye. I told him to come over, alone, and bring the keys I had given him 2 Christmases ago. When he arrived, I showed him everything. His eyes widened as he read the papers. "Grandpa, are you sure?" he asked. "This is everything." I smiled for the first time in days. "You were there when I needed someone. That matters more than blood." Ethan's hands shook as he held the folder to his chest. For all Michael's arrogance, it was Ethan who had proven himself worthy of carrying on the family name. The next morning, I told Michael I'd be gone by the end of the week. His face lit up, already picturing renovations and resale value. But I had one more surprise waiting, and it would crush every dollar sign dancing in his head. I told Ethan to meet me at the notary's office on Thursday. Everything would be finalized by then. After that, the house would legally be his. Michael had no idea. He thought he had all the power, but soon he'd learn what real legacy looked like and how easily it could slip through greedy fingers. Thursday came with a crisp breeze, the kind my late wife used to call truth weather. I wore my best suit, the one I'd kept from my retirement ceremony, and stood waiting outside the notary's office as Ethan pulled up. He was nervous, still not used to this level of responsibility, but I saw a fire in his eyes. He had the heart our family needed, the loyalty Michael had long abandoned. Inside, we reviewed the documents one final time. The will had been changed months ago. The trust, the assets, the deed, all of it would now belong to Ethan. The notary looked at me, almost surprised. "You're certain about this?" she asked. I nodded without hesitation. This isn't about punishment, it's about honor. And with a final signature, everything changed. Back home, I found Michael pacing the living room, on the phone with a contractor, loudly discussing tearing down the garden, the one his mother planted. I waited for him to hang up, then handed him a small envelope. He opened it without suspicion. Inside was a letter from my attorney along with a certified copy of the new ownership records. At first he laughed. Then his eyes stopped moving. His face fell. "What is this?" he asked, his voice shaky. "It's the future," I replied. "And it doesn't have your name on it anymore." He stammered, demanded answers, threatened legal action, but it was all already done. Irrevocable, witnessed, signed. His face turned red, then pale. He looked around, realizing the home he tried to steal was no longer his to touch. He left in a rage, slamming the door so hard a picture frame fell from the wall. I picked it up. It was a photo of my wife holding a baby Michael in her arms, smiling as if nothing could ever go wrong. I set it back on the shelf, but turned it slightly, just enough to reflect the front door where Ethan now stood, holding the keys that were once mine. "It's yours now," I said. "Take care of it better than I did." Ethan nodded, silent but proud. In that moment, I didn't feel like a bitter old man reclaiming power. I felt like a father again. not to the son who betrayed me, but to the grandson who proved love doesn't skip generations. It just waits patiently to be remembered. That night, the house felt different, not empty, lighter, as if years of resentment had finally walked out the front door with Michael. I made tea like I always did, but this time, Ethan joined me. He didn't ask questions, he just sat quietly, watching the steam rise from his cup, as if trying to understand the weight of what had just happened. "You didn't have to do that," he finally said. "But you did." I looked at him and saw the kind of man I had hoped Michael would become. Steady, respectful, thoughtful. "You earned it," I told him. "Not because you asked, but because you didn't." And he nodded, with that same humble strength my wife used to say would change the world one day. The next morning, the neighborhood buzzed with gossip. Michael had clearly wasted no time in telling everyone his side of the story, how his selfish old man had betrayed him, how I'd lost my mind. But it didn't matter. People had watched me walk that sidewalk for over 40 years. They saw who did the gardening, who fixed the neighbor's porch for free, who carried his wife inside when she was too sick to walk. The truth didn't need defending. It had roots here. And when the mailman handed me a stack of envelopes with sympathy notes tucked inside, I realized something. This wasn't just my home anymore. It was part of my legacy. Ethan offered to move in permanently. He even suggested turning the garage into a workshop where he could build furniture again, a craft we'd once shared when he was little. The thought of sawdust and music filling the air again made my heart swell. Life, it seemed, wasn't over. It was evolving. Meanwhile, Michael went quiet. No calls, no apologies, just silence. But I didn't grieve him like I thought I would. I grieved the boy he once was. The one who ran to me with scraped knees and wide eyes. That boy had disappeared long before the lawyers showed up on my birthday. And as painful as that realization was, it also gave me peace, because in his place, a better man had risen, one who hadn't been born to me, but who had chosen me. Weeks passed, and peace settled into the house like an old friend returning home. I found myself waking up earlier, walking the garden with my hands behind my back, just like I used to when my wife was still alive. The silence no longer felt heavy, it felt earned. Ethan had transformed the garage into a stunning workspace, polished wood counters, neatly hung tools, sunlight pouring in from new windows he'd installed himself. It brought me joy I hadn't felt in years. Every sound of his saw and hammer echoed like a heartbeat, reminding me that I still had purpose, that I hadn't been discarded like Michael tried to do, that I still mattered. One afternoon, as Ethan and I stained a rocking chair he had built for the front porch, he paused and said, "Grandpa, I think she'd be proud of you." It caught me off guard. I hadn't heard anyone mention my wife in a long time. I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. "She would have liked seeing you here. You remind me of her, patient, steady, quietly strong." He smiled, brushing varnish along the armrest. "I learned that from you." That moment meant more than anything Michael had ever said to me in the last 2 decades. But just as I started to believe life had finally righted itself, a letter arrived. It was from Michael. The handwriting was sharp, angry, like each word had been carved in resentment. He demanded to renegotiate the will. He claimed I had made decisions under duress and threatened legal action if I didn't reconsider. I read it once, then again, and then I placed it on the fireplace mantel without saying a word. That evening over dinner, I showed it to Ethan. He read it calmly, then placed it back down and said, "Let him come." His eyes didn't waver. "He won't win. He already lost the only thing that mattered, your trust." I went to bed that night, not with fear, but with clarity. Michael could fight all he wanted, but he had already chosen his path the moment he walked in here on my birthday with a lawyer instead of a hug. What he didn't understand, what he never understood, was that inheritance isn't just about money. It's about character, and I had already passed mine on to the right person. A week after the letter arrived, Michael showed up at my front gate. He didn't call first. He never did things the respectful way. He stood there in an expensive suit, arms crossed, flanked by some slick-looking lawyer who couldn't have been older than Ethan. I watched them from the front window, sipping my tea, calm as still water. Ethan walked to the door, ready to confront them, but I stopped him. "Let me handle this," I said. My voice was quiet but firm. When I stepped outside, Michael didn't waste time. "You're making a mistake," he snapped. "This house, this land? Dad, it's supposed to be ours. Mine. You're confused. He's using you." He gestured at Ethan like he was some stranger, not his own son. I didn't respond with anger. I just looked him dead in the eye. "You kicked me out on my birthday, Michael. You brought a lawyer to evict your own father." He opened his mouth to argue, but I raised a hand. "You taught me exactly who you are that day, and I finally believed you." The lawyer stepped forward, offering some legalese about reversing the will. I listened, nodded politely, and then handed him a folder I had prepared days ago. Inside were updated copies of the trust, bank records, medical evaluations confirming my mental clarity, and a recorded statement. Everything airtight. The lawyer's face dropped. "You don't have a case," I told Michael flatly. "Not legally, not morally, not even in your own heart." He looked stunned. For once, he had no words, just rage simmering beneath the surface of his skin. "I gave you everything I could," I said, "my love, my time, every chance to be a decent man. But when it came time to give back, you showed me what I meant to you." Michael didn't apologize. Of course he didn't. Instead, he turned around and stormed off with his lawyer, leaving the gate swinging open behind them. Ethan came outside and stood beside me in silence. We watched them drive away, not with triumph, but with relief. I felt no need for revenge. This wasn't about winning, it was about healing. Later that evening, Ethan and I burned the letter in the fireplace. The flames ate away the last remnants of guilt I didn't realize I was still carrying. "He's not coming back," Ethan said. "I know," I replied, and for the first time in years, I meant it, without sadness. The weeks that followed were peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in decades. No more anxious glances at the phone, no more walking on eggshells, wondering when the next blow would come from my own son. Ethan and I settled into a quiet routine. He cooked, I gardened, we played chess in the evenings and listened to old records on the back porch, watching the sun dip behind the trees like it used to when his father was still alive. Life felt simple, not because it lacked complication, but because we had removed the rot that had been eating away at it for too long. But peace doesn't erase the past. One afternoon, Ethan found an old photo album in the attic. Dusty, water-stained, but full of memories. Pictures of Michael as a boy, Ethan in his mother's arms, birthdays, barbecues, family trips, where we once pretended everything was normal. We sat there flipping through the pages in silence. I expected to feel bitter. Instead, I felt a strange kind of grief. For the man Michael could have been, for the father I tried so hard to be, and for the years I couldn't get back. "Do you think he ever loved us?" Ethan asked, his voice low. I took a long breath before answering. "I think he loved the idea of us, the image, but not the responsibility, not the reality of who we are." Ethan didn't speak after that, he just nodded, as if something finally clicked inside him. That night I watched him sleep on the living room couch, one arm draped over his dog-eared notebook, and I realized he was everything I had hoped for in a son. Kind, loyal, resilient, and above all, present. When I looked at my will again, I didn't feel hesitation. I felt clarity. I made sure everything was locked up tight. The house, the savings, the small business I'd helped a friend build years ago that now brought in modest income. All of it was Ethan's now, not because he asked, not because he was perfect, but because he stood by me when it mattered, when it was hardest. That kind of loyalty doesn't just deserve reward, it demands it. As fall arrived, the leaves turned gold and red across the property. I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders and watched Ethan fix the squeaky gate. He looked back at me with a grin that reminded me so much of his mother, it ached in my chest. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a burden. I felt like a man who had made the right decision, even if it took me 75 years to finally do it. As the holidays approached, the air turned colder, but my heart, strangely, felt warmer than it had in years. I watched Ethan decorate the small living room with the same string lights we'd used since he was a kid. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't expect gifts. His presence was enough. And for a man like me, who once thought his only legacy would be pain and regret, that meant everything. Michael hadn't called. Not once. Not after being served the final copy of the will, not after realizing that the home he tried to take from me now legally belonged to the grandson he had mocked and ignored for years. I heard from a distant cousin that he tried to contest it in court, but the lawyer laughed him out of the room. Everything had been airtight. Every page of the will bore my signature, witnessed and filed properly, and Ethan's name was written on every asset, every deed, every future. I should have felt vindicated, maybe even triumphant. But what I really felt was free. Free from the guilt of a father who had tried for decades to love a son who only saw him as an obstacle. Free from the pressure to keep the peace at the cost of my own dignity. And most of all, free to finally spend the years I had left with someone who cared, not because of what I had, but because of who I was. One night, Ethan and I sat on the porch with mugs of hot cider. The stars above us were clear, unbothered by city lights or noise. "Grandpa," he said, "do you regret it? Any of it?" I smiled, taking a long sip. "I regret waiting so long to put myself first. But I don't regret this, not one bit." He leaned back in his chair, satisfied with that answer. So was I. To anyone listening right now, maybe you've been made to feel small, disposable, or like your worth depends on someone else's approval. Maybe your own family has turned their back on you. I want you to remember this. You are not defined by those who fail to see your value. You're defined by how you choose to stand up, especially when it's hardest. I stood up at 75, and it wasn't too late. It's never too late. If this story touched you, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe for more powerful life stories, and leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever had to walk away from family to protect your peace? You're not alone. Thank you for watching, and remember, the strongest people are often the ones no one saw coming.